So we're let's get going right away because we've got a lot to talk about tonight. We have Johanna Mueller, printmaker, who's been with the show a number of years, and we're going to really dive in and talk about this work because you are doing so many fantastic things and layering pieces and multiple images together that I think, if we could really kind of talk about what's going on in these and get kind of behind the scenes on them. I think it's really important to do with your work in particular, just so people can get a true understanding of the depth that is there. We have William Hughes, who is brand new to the Coor Show, photographer. All you fly fishermen and women, this is going to knock your socks off. You're going to love it. And Andrew Beckham, who is an old pro with us at this point, and photographer, and actually working into some other mediums with charcoal. So Andrew, I'm diving in with you, man. We're just going to go right in here. I'm putting the spotlight on you. And welcome.
Thanks, Rose. It's great to be back. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having a conversation this evening.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad. And usually our evening conversations, a lot of people like to chime in, so they're pretty entertaining. So anyway, thanks for being here. And I'm always, every time I go to your studio, you're up to something. You're just up to something new. This time you sent me into your gallery down on Santa Fe Drive to see some really large works. And you know what? I am just going to go right ahead and do a screen share and pull up Premonition so people can see this. This is just such a wow piece of art. And I don't know if I just lost my screen share there. Hang on a second. Let me stop and start it again. Here we go. Okay, so here is Premonition. And this is, okay, correct me if I'm wrong here. This is based on your photography, but it's charcoal.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So just a whirlwind kind of nutshell version of what's going on here. So I started, there's 5 of these works, and they're all 4 by 6 feet to give a sense of scale for folks taking a look here. And I start with my photographic practice as a foundation. And what happens in terms of process is that I make what I would describe as a ghost print on a 4 by 6 sheet, not of photo paper, but of traditional printmaking paper. Mm-hmm. However, that print is barely visible. I would describe it as a ghost print. It's hardly visible at all. And then I rebuild the entire tonal and contrast structure of the image through drawing. So this is charcoal. And the reason that it was important to me to work in this particular way is because Premonition is part of a larger body of work called Harbinger, Stories from a Burning Planet. And it's really about trying to hold in tension around the way of landscape can be beautiful and even sublime, while recognizing that it is simultaneously at times that very beauty, that very sublimity can also be a harbinger or a sign of a world that's ecologically out of balance. And so this particular image is about a fallen cottonwood tree due to drought. And all of the images in this series address similar kinds of concerns about a rapidly changing planet and ecosystem, and trying to hold beauty and loss kind of in the same space.
Okay, so this may sound like a dumb question, but I'm gonna just, me, I gotta ask it.
Yeah.
Why go through the trouble of
Yeah.
drawing?
Right. Now, that's a great question. So when you think about charcoal in particular, and the kind that I use predominantly for this, I actually use it in a lot of different forms, right? So powdered charcoal, liquid charcoal that I apply with a brush, it almost becomes painting at times. But the majority of the work I do, the hand work I do here, is with vine charcoal. And vine charcoal is basically wood. It's willow, usually, and it's kiln fired so that it is, transformed by heat. And when you think about the catastrophic wildfires in the West that we've had in recent years and will continue to have, for me, charcoal was absolutely the right medium because it was a way to use a material that was indicative of the landscape as we're coming to see it transform in the 21st century in the Mountain West. And so for me, using charcoal was a way to bring the materiality of the landscape itself back into the imagery.
Interesting. And the scale of it too, 4 feet tall, 6 feet wide. I mean, these are really, I was in front of 3 of them in your gallery, and they're very impressive. But talk about the scale. Like, I'm guessing that's on purpose.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the content of this work is weighty, and I think that to express that idea of the sublime and at the same time express the idea of being grieved, of having experience of loss, of a planet that is in flux, required making work at a scale that would become an immersive experience for the viewer. These images and the reasons that I made them, I think would not have resonated in the same way on a smaller scale.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. Standing in front of these, it's not this isn't a good comparison, but when you're in Monet water lilies, but you do kind of become immersed in it. This pulls you in a different way. I think it, when I was in front of the work anyway, it was like a wow. And you just really get kind of the gravity of the work and the situation in a really different way. And there's something about, to me, the vine charcoal and the way you're using it in conjunction with your photographic work, that it does something different. It sort of takes it to a different place. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it does. No, I think you're right. It does. I think that the very fact that there's handwork, that it basically is, the foundation is a photographic image, but at the end of the day, this is a large scale drawing. And when you're talking about traditional works on paper materials, whether it's drawing or printmaking or painting, there's something about the physicality of the material on the page that, for me, moves an image into a more narrative context and maybe a little bit less of a documentary context. Although, as you know, my photographic work is not documentary at all. It's all built around visual metaphor and content in other directions. But the physicality of the materials makes a difference.
Yeah. And you know what, let's slide into the photographic work, because we're getting 5 photographs this time as well with that. And so the notch top and the snag, I love this piece when I saw it immediately in your studio. And but talk about this, and you came upon this and you were telling me the story of finding this. Were you hiking with your son?
My family. Yeah, with my family. Yeah. Yeah. And it was just this lovely juxtaposition of this down snag on the right, this sort of pale, sun-bleached ghost of an ancient, remnant, and the way that it was in conversation with the notch top spire, kind of just left of center up there in the top of the frame. And I love the sort of conversation those two objects are having.
Yeah.
But the other thing that we should talk about with this work is the surface treatment, which, you know, I should say for everybody listening this evening, and for folks who may tune in later, you can't see part of what this image is about, right? So there's this interesting sort of surprise or hidden thing that happens under certain circumstances, right? And so one of the things that happened over the summer for me and I'm an alpinist. I climb a lot of mountains and I do a lot of hikes in the summer, and which is where a lot of my material comes from. And if you've ever been in the mountains and you've ever on a sunny day when the sun's at the right angle in the sky relative to where you are, and you're moving through the landscape, and you're up high on the big glacially polished slabs of granite, and that whole kind of subalpine and alpine landscape, it can sparkle. I mean, it can literally sparkle, and that's because of a mineral called mica that is intruded into these larger slabs of schist and granite. And so I discovered that I could. There are certain places where mica is harvestable, so to speak, and so I would take very small quantities of mica from the places that I hiked and climbed, and back in the studio I ground the mica into a powder. I actually have some right here. I'll show you, kind of show folks.
Nice.
And you can kind of see how it sparkles there a little bit. And I would dust it with brushes and sort of move it around, almost draw with it over the surface of the photograph, and then do layers of varnish to adhere it. And so what happens with all of these images that we're going to look at is that the very sparkle of the mica that is present in these physical locations of all these photographs is now embedded into the image. And so it's similar to the charcoal. It's a way of using the materiality of the landscape to inform the image in a very tactile way. And what's interesting about these photographs is that they sparkle in a magical way under certain lighting conditions, but under other lighting conditions, you would never know the mica was there. And that's
right.
Go ahead.
And that was just a really interesting thing when I was in your studio, because when you see them, it's exactly right. I think when they're flat, you don't see it, but when it's up and the light catches it, I think it's just going to be really fascinating. First of all, you always give me a really difficult time hanging your work, and this is going to be no exception.
I will tell you right now that these are going to be challenging. They just are. And one of the things, if you see behind me, you see my easel back here, and I've got a couple of more pieces from this project there. So, and my ceilings are relatively low in my studio, and the easel's tipped back at an angle. And of course, this was just the workspace where I was making all of these throughout the summer. And so everything I was doing was in the context of the geometry of this space that I'm in right now.
Right.
And so what I have discovered just recently with framing them and moving them around is that, the lighting is very particular to actually get that full on sparkle.
We're gonna have to play with these for sure. The other thing I want to talk about, and then I'm gonna pull up the other images as we go through, but the other thing I want to talk about is this particular work, and please elaborate on this, but this particular work, when we were in the studio looking at it and talking about it, this is kind of you also going a little bit back to more of the traditional turn of the century photographers, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was on my mind over the summer was not so much the big name professional photographers, who, whether it would be like Timothy O'Sullivan or, all of the folks after the Civil War who did the survey work with the USGS, or even Ansel Adams, who of course is kind of the iconic kind of West Coast early
Right.
20th century landscape photographer. But I was thinking about all of the guys who put up their shingle in, early Estes Park or early Yosemite, and started making postcards, right? I was thinking about the sort of that line between early professional landscape photographers and early vernacular photography by enthusiasts and tourists.
Yeah.
And yeah, and how there was a whole sort of aesthetic vocabulary of early photographs, particularly of the national parks, in the early part of the 20th century. And it's not that I was trying to emulate those, it was just more that they were on my mind as I was making these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you got to talk about this one because, quite honestly, I'm going to just tell you, when I saw this in your studio, I thought you messed with this photo.
I did not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean,
it's impossible. What's happening here?
Yeah. I mean, so here's the deal. Very still water on mountain lakes is not an unusual occurrence, but it usually happens in the pre-dawn hours, and if you're lucky, a little bit past sunrise before the wind picks up, right? What was truly unusual about this, so unusual, in fact, that I'd never seen this before in all of my years, as a photographer, is that the water stayed still all the way through the morning.
Wow.
And so I made this image at probably 10:30 in the morning when I was already up well above tree line on my way up a 13er in the Collegiate Peaks. And looking back down, I couldn't believe it, that the water was still just a sheet of glass, essentially. So yeah, it was just a highly unusual sort of set of weather circumstances that I lucked out on being at the right place at the right time.
Wow. Fortuitous.
Yeah.
Okay. This one too was just, you come up with these really fascinating compositions too, I think. And this one here is, where are we in this photo, I should say? So
this is Oozle Falls, which is kind of an iconic waterfall in Rocky Mountain National Park and down in the southern part of the park in Wild Basin. And the dark shape on the right is a very, very old and very, very large fir tree. And then on the left, on the other side of the waterfall, you can see it's a rock face that just fades into deep, deep shadow. And I love the way that framing it this way created a kind of a window visually.
Yeah. That's really amazing. Okay, sentinels. Yeah, and you capture these sentinels, Odessa Gorge. And I'm always just, some of my favorite photos of yours are these just strange rocks that just sort of crop out of,
right. Yeah, this was, one of those instances where there was a sort of a formal alignment of foreground, middle ground, and background objects that just was, rather extraordinary. And the light was beautiful, and this is a place that it's a place that's near and dear to my heart in Rocky Mountain National Park, because it's one of the few places from the kind of Bear Lake hub of access where, that literally gets hundreds of thousands of hikers every year, probably millions. But the upper end of this gorge, nobody goes there. So it's a bit of a secret.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Secret no more. Okay. Mountain Toll. How high up are you here with this one?
13,000 feet. I'm on the summit of Pawnee Peak.
Okay.
Looking across at Mount Toll. Yeah.
How much gear do you hike up with?
More than I would like, but less than I used to.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And this one, I recall the way you added the mica, or the, on top of
Yep.
This one really in particular has a great just body
Yeah.
to it. And let me pull up your last one and then we're gonna slip over to
Yep.
Johanna.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Ancient Limber Pine in
Yep.
Sandal Gorge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just,
this is all texture. God, look at
yep.
that.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And I love the way that if you look at the trunk of the limber pine, which by the way is probably about 1,000 years old,
Wow.
these incredible trees. If you look at the trunk of it, it's making a kind of kind of right in the center of the frame. It's making a kind of a V or a U shape, and I love the way that it was sort of mirroring the U shape at the top of the gorge. So
Oh yeah.
I was just really, I thought that
Wow.
conversation was beautiful.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. Okay. Go nowhere, my friends. I am going to call on Johanna Mueller. Hey, Johanna.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I can. I can. Thanks for hopping on the call tonight.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. Thanks for having me at the show.
Oh
I'm
my
just
God.
super excited we're actually doing this year.
Yeah,
So
we are actually doing it.
yeah,
Yeah. It come hell or high water, I'm told. Hey, everybody who's listening in, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat and I will ask our artists. So feel free to do that. So Johanna is a very, very busy printmaker and doing some incredible work. And I just was unpacking your work today. And yeah, again, you're just adding in so many elements to the work. It's amazing. And so it's always a joy to see what you have. And so I want to talk about with your work, and I'm going to do the screen share again, and I'm going to pull up your page here, but I really want to talk about, yeah, so I love this guy. Talk about inspiration. Where does this come from?
yeah, this one, the title is called Eden, Impossible Garden, and thinking a lot about climate change. It seems to be on everybody's mind. And I
Yes,
think in
indeed.
Colorado, we've just been so affected by it with what we're breathing in and watching our forests burn and the water issues that we already have here. So I think it's something that's definitely on the forefront of everyone's mind. But as artists, we're all interpreting these massive changes that are happening really quickly. I created this one during 2020, the main block. So just a little bit about the process. I work with relief engraving. So it's a lot like a traditional block print, like you'd see a linoleum or a wood block, but the material that I use is a lot harder and more dense. And so I use an engraving tool, which produces a lot finer mark. And so I've been carving these blocks, and now I have the last 10-15 years worth of work of all of the blocks, and I'm finding really interesting ways to combine them. So that central block that has the cactus and the pomegranate tree and the little rabbit hopping off at the top there, that's all one block, and then there's like 5 or 6 other pieces that are printed and then very delicately hand cut and collaged in to this piece. And so thinking about the serendipity that happens, sort of like Andrea was saying, with those double shapes that show up, for me, it's how these animals start talking to each other and more or less almost like acting next to each other on the page. And then the color also really changes the attitude and the impression that these make on people. I used to do a lot of my work in very traditional black and white, just printing with black ink on white paper. And I started using color And I've been using a lot of these beautiful blends, which you can do in printmaking, where you have more than one color of ink on the roller, and it very seamlessly blends the two colors together. So those agave at the bottom go from a dark green to that more lime color. But it's something that I've always really loved. You see it a lot in printmaking, but it's a little harder to mimic unless you have like an airbrush or something. So watching how these pieces come together has been really fun for me. And I started in 2020 during our sort of shutdown time when I had a lot of studio time, and I tried to take as much advantage of that as possible. And one of the things I did was start to make pieces with the intention of adding them to other pieces. So for a printmaker, that normally you make a piece and you want to addition that work, but I was creating work so that I could make these unique pieces. And that was another thing that I had the sort of luxury of time during that closure period. And yeah, so the sort of that foliage block is one that I created, and it's one that I'm using a lot, and I have plans to make others. And so then getting back to the concept, thinking about all of these large mammals that we're starting to hear about their numbers dwindling. There's talk of this sixth extinction, especially of large mammals. And so I did a series of the trophy head pieces, the deer and the antelope are from that series, combining them with these bears and basically putting these animals together in an environment where they would not exist. And then playing on that, where there's the cactus again next to that pomegranate tree. There's this very lush tropical foliage, and then there are those agave succulent sort of cacti at the bottom. And thinking about that, the concept or metaphor of the Garden of Eden being this perfect place that is no longer available to us as humans, and thinking about that through the lens of climate change, again, as a metaphor for this beautiful environment that has existed and now is being rapidly changed into very different landscapes as we see the rainforest being clear cut and soybean fields planted, etc.
Right. So I also let me just ask you too, because I definitely want you to talk about these images, but let me also ask you too, because it's nice to see these. I got to handle them today, but it's nice to see these on the screen so big, because paper is a big part of, your paper choice. And also these are really small editions. Like I think that Garden of Eden one is of 3, and then the rest of these are of 5. So they're very small editions.
Yeah, they're a lot of work. So and they rely on the handmade paper. So there are some variations in them that do make them a little more unique, but there's made in the same series where I'm using all the same color ink and the same registration. So everything's printed as much the same as they can be, but then like that strip of marbled paper is what it is under the fox that sort of looks like a giant paintbrush. Will vary. The markings in the other hand paper will vary. But I think that's what a lot of modern working printmakers are really interested in, is less the addition and more using printmaking as a tool as an artist. And I love the mark making that happens with the tools that I use. I love the built-in narrative that these pieces carry because of the history that block print has with literature, and then how that further sort of tells our human stories. And so there's a lot of things that are on my mind, but then there's also these larger stories that are told with them. And this one is one that a lot of people really love. And it's one that is a really important image for me because it reminds me as an artist to continue to try and introspect and find the things of value for me. So the fox is sort of meditating or looking inward, and finds the raven in the heart center. And the
Mhm.
raven being an animal that's connected to the spirit world or to the nether worlds, from Odin's ravens to Edgar Allan Poe's ravens.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
All sorts of stories around ravens as they relate to the heavens and the afterlife. And so that as that intuition that comes with knowing that there's something larger than you, and that connection to, again, the larger spirits in this world that connect
Mhm.
us and make us human and allow us to find that that place on the planet. And so from that process of introspecting comes growth. And so there are little shoots of sort of stylized corn coming up the fox's feet, and then all of that world underneath. It's almost as if it's the hidden things under our feet. And again, the beauty of the earth, we often pave right over it, but there's beauty to the fields and the mountains and all sorts. I've been living sort of out in the eastern, not quite the plains, but close. And so I've had a newfound appreciation for flatter grassland spaces. And so I've been using those expanses in my work too. And then the mountains also come in and out.
Wow. There's often, and not in this one, but the next one we're going to pull up, you often have animals within animals. And I think that really, like, I love talking to you about those too, because it just kind of communicates a lot in a pretty subtle, unique way too. So this one right here, it is a more quiet, simple, but there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, it is kind of a quieter piece. And I find myself doing these pieces, I think, because there's a lot of chaos in the world. It's nice to find a resting spot. And I think people need that too in the arts, and we all need something to look at. I really enjoyed living with the art in my house this last year.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
really fortunate to have those pieces that I could just stare at and get lost in, because I needed that. I stopped watching the news and would
Yeah,
watch
no
art
kidding.
on the walls. Yeah, a piece like this, it feels a little quieter, but again, I think there's that nod to the peacefulness in the natural world that we're able to find and appreciate. I think it's really wonderful. I get reminded to be more zen every time I'm around my dog, who is so excited to have food, so excited to have a walk, and just is, my companion in all things. And other than my husband, he's great too. But
Yeah, right. He like
yeah,
scratches behind the ears as well, I bet.
right.
Hey, so talk about, okay, so I want you to get a little technical here. You use a technique called sheen collé.
Mhm.
Would you talk about that? Because that is something that people don't really know about, but you use it a lot in your work. And so I'd love for you to explain that just a little bit as to what's going
Yeah.
on, because there's a bunch of it in here, right?
There is, yeah. So again, the bird is a block that's been printed, and then the bottom, those floral pieces, the leaf sort of shape that comes out is also from one of my carved blocks. And there's actually another little piece cut in there too. It's so subtle that you wouldn't know it until you're really trying to pick it apart. And I hope that people just enjoy the image, but printmakers always love process. So
Yeah.
yeah, but chine collé is actually a French word that means China glue, and it was because some of the glues were coming from that region, perhaps that or the paper. It's something that I traditionally was taught to use a lightweight paper on top of a thicker, heavier weight Western paper. So I'm using really thin Japanese paper that I print on, and then you can use a variety of different glues to attach the thinner Japanese paper that's been printed to the Western backer sheet. So the bird is actually printed directly on the Western paper, and then the other papers are Shinkolade onto that heavier backer sheet. And then I'm using some found papers. So there's also those little florets. I'm not sure which is left or right, but the turquoise with the gold running through it. Yeah, that's actually a found paper, as is that really fine wood grain. And then I'll go back in with paint and colored pencil sometimes to push and pull the surface. So there's some very subtle layers of that happening in there too. And in the addition, I'm doing all of the same treatment and using all the same round of printing and inking for all 5 pieces. So I might print, like for that one, I probably printed 15 prints, and then 3 of each of those rounds gets cut and collaged into one piece of paper to make the 5 prints, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so really labor intensive then.
Yeah.
So talk about this piece here too.
Yeah, this one is kind of a combination of some of those other themes with coming together with the planet on those larger levels and appreciating the cycles that we have. I think as humans, we forget sometimes that we are really ruled by the sun and the moon. And even though we have lights and we can stay up late, it's the sun still makes our days happen. And the cycles of the moon, when I do pay attention to them, I feel different. So these 2 animals, the wolf and the little raven, are sort of communing under this full moon, but then there's some other geometry happening in there. And then the eye, in my work, I use the eye as a symbol for witness. And so again, it's like the larger universe is sort of witnessing everything that's happening on this planet. And we as the humans also are the ones, as scientists and people who are recording all this information about everything that we learn. I use the eye as a symbol for the human element.
Yeah. And again, adding in those different papers too, to create this just wonderful world that we kind of roll into with these. Okay, this one is actually just so joyful. Midnight Rabbit Run. Yeah. So talk about this, and you've got like star patterns and almost starry night stars and just so many different things.
Yeah, I think it is a really fun one. For me, the rabbit is an animal of the feminine, and the fish is an animal that reminds me to sort of go with the flow. When you watch fish, it's very relaxing, and watching them move as a school, they move seamlessly and all together. So I think the 2 of those together, it's like when you allow yourself to just let go and be who you are, and if you're able to kind of just enjoy that midnight run that you're on. And so again, a little bit of beauty in here. This is just a really fun piece. And then kind of like the one before with the wolf and the moon, this one has the stars. And everyone always asks, is that a real constellation? And it is not. It's just a metaphorical one, to represent, again, that connection to the much larger universe that surrounds us, which I think is a really beautiful concept.
Wow. Okay. So, go nowhere, my friends. I am going to swing on over to Bill Hughes, and you are going to be in the spotlight. Yay. Thank you for being here. And so, again, first year with the show. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and say this out loud. People always say, how do I get into the core show? And I'm like, you need to knock my socks off at this point. You really need to knock my socks off. And yeah, you, my friend, did that in spades. So I'm going to pull up your images but I really, so this is photography. So would you just give us some background about you? Because I think knowing your background and working with parks and wildlife and fish and game and all that kind of stuff, I think that really, and scientists helps inform this work. Because I know I called you when I first saw this because I was like, what is going on here? Is this guy making this stuff up? So tell us give us the background, because you're brand new to the show.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for the kind words. Absolutely. And thanks for including me in the show. It's an honor. So all of these images are taken from a long-term project that I've been photographing beginning in 2017 when I was living just outside of Estes Park, about the trout, the underwater environments of Rocky Mountain National Park. So first and foremost, I consider myself a documentary photographer. All of these images are accurate as they exist in nature. I am not manipulating them. I'm not changing elements. I'm not shifting things around. The only thing that I'm doing are adjusting lighting, contrast, color, and my goal is to recreate the images as they existed when I saw them.
Where did this idea of this? Okay, so this is almost like from the fish's perspective.
Many of my images are, right?
Yeah.
And so the project began to document the Greenback cutthroat trout, which is the state trout of Colorado, state fish of Colorado. That the backstory is fascinating. It's actually been declared officially extinct twice.
Wow.
Once in the late 30s, and then again, I believe, in the early 1960s.
Wow.
And subsequently, populations were rediscovered that once turned out not to actually be the correct fish. And then a small population was discovered near Colorado Springs. Genetic testing was done through the University of Colorado. To make a long story short, the fish that they thought they had been reintroducing as greenback cutthroat trout were not greenback cutthroat trout. Right. And now there are a few small populations that exist in the park, in Rocky Mountain National Park, and just outside of it. Just to give you an idea, the current range of the fish is somewhere in the neighborhood of, if you want to be generous, 1% of what they were historically.
Wow.
And that's rounding up. It's probably more like, a small 0.1% of where they actually, so they're incredibly rare.
Wow.
And they don't exist anywhere outside of Northern Colorado.
Oh, really? And
Yeah.
now I think, were you saying that water temperatures are affecting their populations as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's another, just like the other artists we're talking about climate change and destruction of the natural environment. And, estimates going forward now for the next 50 years or so, we may lose another 85% of that habitat. And I don't want to concentrate on the negatives of it. I want to show what this is and why it's important. What these conservation efforts are trying to protect. It's important.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm going to click on some other images here too, but also, like, what was the thing that pulled you in? Like, were you a fly fisherman or?
Right. I grew up in Colorado. I grew up fly fishing. And one idea that I've started exploring in this project is, what do these trout represent? Documentary photographer, wildlife photographer, I find it fascinating that these fish exist in a gray zone between wildlife and of course, the fishing community, the fly fishing community. Are they food for a fisherman? Are they a plaything? Or are they an animal? And it depends on who you're talking about and what world you're talking about.
Mhm.
And I find it fascinating too that even within a completely protected area in the national park system, where every plant and mushroom and insect and mineral, rock, every natural feature is completely protected. You cannot harm them, you cannot harass them, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
You can go fishing. And under certain conditions and in certain locations, you can not only catch the fish, but kill them and eat them.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that I'm against this. I find the concept fascinating. Like I said, I came to this because I am a fisherman and I understand the inherent beauty of these animals.
Mhm.
And with this work, I'm trying to show how they exist in their natural habitat
Yeah.
and that they're a part of these ecosystems.
I think this is always to me such a wonderful thing that art does. In particular, I think representational art, which I'm gonna put all of you under that big broad umbrella, but there's a beauty to it. And you draw people in with the beauty, and then you have a conversation with them. You
Exactly.
don't start out like holding a flag or a banner, or you know what I mean? Like, people are drawn in out of beauty and curiosity. And certainly in these photos, I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of beauty. And then, you see this beautiful water and the sun and in this natural place that is going to feel really familiar to anybody who's hiked around Colorado anywhere. And then all of a sudden there's this fish kind of, and it just seems like it's just this precious sort of crazy thing, because if you stand on the shores, you don't just look down and see a fish,
No, it's a hidden world. It's a world within a world.
Yes, right, exactly.
It's below people's feet, but even people that are fishing, even people that visit the region specifically to catch these fish, rarely, if ever, get to see these perspectives.
Yeah.
And these colors. Say what you will about the northern Front Range of the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, but the colors are muted for the most part. The palettes are in grays and browns and dark greens.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere, there are these little jewels, right? These bright crimsons and blaze oranges that aren't found anywhere else. And that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Your photos have such a wonderful artistic balance. And so this is something I also want to call out with your work, is that if you are just a guy taking pictures of endangered trout, okay, great. That's awesome. But these are works of art. Like, these are just so beautifully balanced, and the color and your design, your eye of designing these. And this one, I look at and I look at and I look at, and I just do not know what the hell is happening. What is happening right here?
The bottom part of the frame is the image. The top part of the frame, again, we were talking about an unusually still day where there's no wind rippling the surface of the water. The top part, the reverse part, is the fish and the bottom of the pond being reflected off the bottom of the surface of the water. So this is completely done in camera. There's no funny business, Photoshop or other software going on here.
Oh my God. Okay, whatever. I still don't. This is really like hurting my brain. I
Inevitably,
love
when you
this
get this
photo.
image back from the printer, inevitably they have this one upside down.
Yeah, right.
Can I just
Yeah.
jump in? Can I just jump in to say
Yeah,
that
Andrew, please.
that's just an astonishing image, and I've seen this phenomenon before, but I've never seen anybody get it on film. Nicely done.
Thank you.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of elements have to line up for this to happen. You know, you should see my tens of thousands of outtakes, you know.
Yeah. That's all part of it though, isn't it? You know what, I think, you know, with these photos and photography, and Andrew, you know this as well as anybody, photography has this kind of major issue because everyone who has a phone has a camera. So everyone's a photographer now?
100 million images uploaded a day.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
no, it really, like billions of images are uploaded every day.
yeah.
But do they mean anything? And I think a lot about that too, and the permanence and you know, technological obsolescence. You know, my phone is full of images I don't look at, and pretty soon I'll get a new phone, and then those images are gone forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, in printing these two, I want to make them as indelible as I possibly can.
Yeah.
I want, in my darker hours, I you know, I don't want to be creating a memoriam for these animals. I don't want to do a Joel Sartori, you know, where he's creating the photo arc, but a number of the animals that he's including in that are already extinct.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that these do some good. I hope that these, you know, bring awareness to the right places, the right people. But in the worst case scenario, this is documenting a thing that existed while I was here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's a thing too, you know, certainly with all three of you artists on this call, and most artists I know, I think my friend Len Schmiel, the landscape painter, said this the best, is if you're going to be a landscape painter, you have to get your hands dirty. And so you have to understand how the earth works and how trees grow and how water eddies. And, you know, you have to understand these things if you're going to paint them. Otherwise, you're just really painting the surface. And what a great metaphor for somebody who understands your subject matter, but understands nature, and you know where to go to find this, you know.
Oh, it's I can tell you it's many hours of research and many hours of hiking, so much hiking. I've been to just about every fish holding lake in Rocky Mountain National Park many times.
Wow.
I tell people, you know, when I grow up, I want to be a 19th century British naturalist.
Yeah, right. Because I think you are the reincarnation of one.
Back in the days when you could be an expert in everything because not that much was known about anything.
Right.
Relatively. Yeah.
Right. I love it. Yeah, these are just magnificent. And let me see, is this one our last one here? Yeah, again, this one too, and using the reflections and the and then there's this vivid color. I mean, this is just like candy.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And this particular fish was in spawn, so they get very bright and colorful when they're in the springtime. These fish spawn, and when they're trying to attract a mate, and they're saying, "Hey, look at me."
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so all right, I told you all that this would happen. Before you know it, our time is up, or soon to be. So all right, I'm going to ask you all to turn on your videos and to take off your mute. And let me toss it out to the three of you. Do you have questions for each other or comments?
I have one comment just real quick to Bill, actually to both of you all, but I'll start with Bill. Just for the record, to put a little bit finer point on it, you're absolutely right that nothing comes or goes out of Rocky Mountain National Park. and the mica collection happens in National Forest for me. So where the right, I mean, really,
I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah.
yeah.
Sure you
Well,
weren't.
you mentioned minerals, and you're right. And I I was a climbing guide in Rocky during my college years, and have climbed most of the mountains in that park. So it sounds like that's a place that's near and dear to both of our hearts. But yeah, I do take very seriously where one can and cannot extract anything from the landscape. So just thought I'd put a little finer point on that. As
Yeah,
the
because you don't
mica
want
is,
it to, yeah, you don't want it to be like in Hawaii where you just have the rest of your life is bad luck if you take a piece of coral, right? I mean, don't they? Isn't
yeah,
that how
right,
they-
right,
You
right.
don't
Yeah.
have to Pele. No.
Yeah,
Fair
yeah,
enough. Fair
yeah,
enough.
very important.
Yeah. And I was just delighted that Johanna was on this call too, because we go back a little bit, and Johanna's done workshops for my students in past years, and
Oh.
this was just a delightful. I mean, both of you all just make tremendous work. It was a real pleasure to get to listen to this conversation tonight.
Yeah, thank you both. I'm always blown away by photography because I never got to really dive in art school. And so seeing images from both of you is just stunning. And seeing them in person, I'm really looking forward to seeing Bill's images, or Bill, right, William. But I've seen Andrew's, and every time those large photographs just really, they take such presence. So yeah, looking forward to it. Good job, Rose.
Yeah. I always find it so interesting on these calls how there's some kind of crazy convergence that happens. And each of you with these really strong perspectives on the environment and protection of the environment and creating awareness too. And, again, I just don't think you can put too fine a point on it that is one of the most beautiful things that art can do is really draw people in and then have a conversation at a certain comfort level,
Yeah.
and create awareness. So anyway, it really, I'm really proud to have this group of artists and to have your voices in the show, and I'm really grateful too, we're going to be in person. So anyway, any other final comments and any questions from our people out there listening in? Any final? All right. Well, hey, I want to thank you all again. And I think I've got a nooner tomorrow. So we're on the world tour here at the Coors show. So I'm getting a lot of art in right now. It's so very exciting. And I just want to let you all know that the second week in December, from starting on the 6th, thank you, Hannah. Hannah says thank you to everybody on the Zoom tonight. I want to let you know, starting December 6th, we're going to have the show hung, and if you want to come and see it, you get to see the whole thing before the holidays. No sales, but you can get to see everything then. And then we open January 4th for the Blue Jean preview, and we're going to do things a little bit differently this year, where it's going to we're going to try and kind of control the numbers. So everybody will be assigned a table, and artists will be seated with patron tables. So some patron, well, everybody, all the patron tables have been asked if you want to request an artist and guest to sit at your table. And so we're going to try something a little different this year, but just we're trying to be really safe with COVID and things like that. So anyway, that's what we have going on. And but if mark your calendar, if you want to come out and see the show early, and you artists too, for sure, December 6th for that week. Everything's going to be up and lit, except for Andrew's work, because it's going to be just fighting it all the way.
If you want to talk about that, I'd be totally happy to talk about that more in terms of like, sort of brainstorming installation strategies.
I might have you come out and work with my installation crew.
Yeah, just give me a holler. Yeah.
Yeah. I might have you do that. So anyway, hey, Hannah, thank you. Annie, Betty, and Artist, thank you for being here on the call tonight. And we'll see y'all soon. Hey, if I don't see you, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Not you, Annie, Hannah, and Betty, because you're going to be on tomorrow's call. So I'll tell you. Just kidding. Okay. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Same to
talk
you,
soon.
Rose. Thank you.
Take care, all.
Bye.
Bye.